Boom, then this horrible scream. You see fire just exploding out of a building. Smoke's just pouring into the sky. 7 babies dead. That's not just some awful accident, okay? It's like a really brutal judgment on all the hidden screw-ups happening behind those walls. Then you get these shots from above showing the factory. It's just this stark, industrial-looking place, sitting way too close to regular houses and what looks like a school. Then it's like bam, 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 people running around, totally panicked. You see the flames reflecting in their eyes, and way off in the distance, you can hear sirens getting louder and louder. Look, I've been digging into industrial disasters for years, trying to figure out exactly what sequence of events leads to people dying when it shouldn't happen. What you usually read in the news, that's just a tiny sliver of the real story. They'll tell you about the fire, they'll tell you about who died, but they hardly ever get into the real mess underneath it all. 7 newborns dead. They do a close-up on some burnt-up junk. It's a really sad reminder of what's gone. Over the next, say, 16 minutes, we're gonna lay bare the system-wide failures and the deliberate shortcuts that turned a place that was supposed to work into a death trap. We'll show you how being near where people live actually became a danger, and why the folks in charge of keeping things safe are often the ones most to blame for it not being safe. You see some text pop up on the screen. Pseudonyms are used for individuals and some locations to protect privacy where legally required or ethically necessary. And the fire is just raging. You see it silhouetted against the dark sky. So 7 newborn babies died after this huge fire broke out at a children's hospital. It was in the Vivek Vihar area of East Delhi, late Saturday night. Source, NDTV. This absolutely devastating thing happened while everyone was sleeping, tearing through a place that should have been a safe haven for the most helpless little ones. Then you see more footage of what happened afterwards. Firefighters trying to fight the fire, paramedics rushing around, their faces just etched with this grim determination. The news reports were pretty stark, very clinical. 7 newborns gone. But behind that number, behind all the official statements, there's this story that's way more complicated and, frankly, infuriating. It's a story about choices that were made, about supervision that was lacking, and ultimately about pure neglect. We see the outside of the hospital now. It's just this blackened shell. Smoke is still kinda drifting out of the damaged building. The fire itself, which people who saw it said started with an explosive force, basically swallowed the building super fast. Source, Hindustan Times. The inferno trapped these tiny, fragile lives inside, turning a place meant for healing into something just unbelievably horrific. Officials confirmed the awful reality. 7 infants died in that blaze. Source, The Hindu. Then it transitions to a map showing Vivek Vihar, and then it zooms right into the specific spot. This wasn't just some random thing that happened out of the blue. This was a result. A result of a system that let a facility with such huge risks operate, and a result of decisions made inside those walls that cared about something else more than the lives they were supposed to protect. You see pictures of the area around it. Apartment buildings, busy streets, kids playing in a park nearby. The contrast is just jarring. The location itself makes you ask questions right away. Vivek Vihar in East Delhi is packed with people. This wasn't some factory out in the middle of nowhere. This was a place where families lived, where kids went to school, where life was happening just feet away from a place holding brand new babies who were critically ill. Source, Times of India. Then you see a neighbor, their face is hidden, and they're speaking with a shaky voice. Neighbor 1, pseudonym. We always heard noises coming from there. Weird sounds, sometimes like machines working way too hard. You never really knew what was going on inside. It was always kind of a worry. Another neighbor, looking really upset. Neighbor 2, pseudonym. You always hope something like this never happens, but you see the building, you hear all the activity, you can't help but wonder. Is it safe? Is it really safe for those little ones? Footage of the hospital from a bit further away, showing how it fits right in with the rest of the city. The first reports we're hearing say the fire started from an air conditioning unit. Source, Indian Express, an AC unit. Something super common, right? But in this case, it became the trigger for something absolutely catastrophic. But was it just a broken AC, or was it an AC unit that was totally overloaded, running in a building where the safety systems were already compromised? A graphic pops up showing a simple timeline. Saturday night fire erupts, 7 newborns die. The fact that the fire spread so incredibly fast really points to a massive failure in how they prevented fires and how they tried to put them out. Hospitals, especially ones with tiny babies, have to have the highest safety standards. But this place in Vivek Vihar ended up becoming a funeral pyre. You cut back and forth between footage of emergency crews showing up. Their faces are grim. You start to get the idea of how big this disaster is. The fire department got there fast, but the fire had already gotten way out of control. Source: NDTV. Their efforts to stop the blaze and get people out were basically heroic, but in the end they were fighting against just impossible odds. Close up on the firefighters' faces. You can practically feel how exhausted they are. This whole situation wasn't just some freak accident. It was the end result of a bunch of overlooked things, possible shortcuts being taken, and just a total disregard for how critically important safety rules are in a place where life is at its most fragile. A shot of the building, outside again. It's now blocked off with police tape. The quietness is really heavy. The real question is if negligence was involved, but how deeply it was woven into everything. We need to look past just the immediate horror and really dig into the environment that allowed a disaster like this to even happen. A slow zoom out from the hospital, and you see the apartment buildings all around it again. The fact that they were so close is just chilling. The fact that a children's hospital, a place meant for nurturing new life, was located so close to potential dangers, and then it went up in flames from something as simple as an AC unit, really shows a massive failure in how things were regulated and in the responsibility of the people running it. A flickering image of a baby's crib, now empty and burned. 7 lives just gone. 7 families completely torn apart. This is the human price you pay for cutting corners. This is what happens when people choose to look the other way. And as we start to peel back the layers of this whole disaster, one thing becomes incredibly clear. The real story behind this fire isn't about the flames themselves, but about the deliberate darkness that allowed them to spread so easily. Slow fade to black. Absolutely. Let's inject some human flavor into this report. Here's that section, rewritten to sound more like a person talking, while keeping all the original info and structure intact. Man, the air in East Delhi's Vivek Vihar area, normally just buzzing with city life, was thick with smoke and pure tragedy that night. Late last Saturday, a really devastating fire just tore through a children's hospital, and the death toll, horrific. 7 newborn babies, their whole lives just starting, were tragically lost in that inferno. This wasn't just some random fire, you know. It felt like a massive failure, a really grim reminder of negligence that let these innocent lives just get snuffed out. So this place, it was identified as a baby care center, and get this, it was operating smack dab in the middle of a really crowded residential neighborhood. It was set up to give much-needed care to the most vulnerable little ones, but instead, it became this scene of unbelievable loss. We really need to dig into the details about how it even got started and why it expanded into this residential zone. Like, how does a medical facility, especially one for infants, end up in a residential area, and what kind of checks and balances were supposed to be there as it grew? Now, looking into whether they followed all the rules and regulations is super important. We absolutely need to check out the official paperwork, the licenses, permits, and all those safety inspections that should have been done. Did they even have operational licenses? Were they current? And most importantly, what did those safety inspections actually find? Or even worse, what did they miss? If there's missing paperwork or weird stuff in the permits they did have, that could totally point to a bigger problem with accountability. This doesn't feel like some sudden, unavoidable accident. It feels more like a tragedy that was brewing, all because nobody did their homework. From what we're hearing, the fire kicked off late Saturday night, and man, it just consumed the hospital. Reports from all sorts of news places confirm the gut-wrenching outcome. 7 newborns didn't make it out of that blaze. The initial word from NDTV, Indian Express, Hindustan Times, Times of India, and the Hindu, they all back up this terrible fact. Just thinking about the sheer number of lives lost, 7 tiny souls, really drives home how incredibly serious this is. To really get our heads around how something like this could even happen, we gotta look past just the immediate scene. We need to hear from people who were actually there, who saw the conditions with their own eyes. Talking to former or current employees, even if they want to stay anonymous, can give us some seriously valuable insights. What was it like working there? Was there this constant problem with equipment not being maintained, especially the stuff that might have even started the fire? Were the staff pushed to focus more on just seeing patients and making money instead of actually following safety rules? Sometimes, the drive to just get things done can have a brutal cost, and here, that cost was measured in the lives of little babies. The fact that the hospital was located so close to where people live also brings up some big questions. How did this place even get the okay to operate in an area that usually isn't for places like this? The folks living nearby probably saw and heard things, you know. Did they notice anything weird going on? Were there ever complaints about noise, safety worries, or anything that hinted at potential dangers? Their stories could really paint a picture of how this hospital existed in the community, maybe showing us warning signs that were just ignored. Right now, the exact reason the fire started, especially if it might have been a faulty air conditioning unit, is still being figured out. What the officials finally say will be key to knowing what actually set it off. But honestly, looking at the bigger picture of how this place was run and what oversight was, or wasn't, it's already painting a pretty grim picture of neglect all around. This wasn't just a bad wire. It feels like a failure across multiple levels of responsibility. This absolutely tragic loss of 7 newborns in Vivek Vihar demands a really deep and honest investigation. It's critical that we find out not just how this fire happened, but why it was even allowed to happen in the first place. That means digging into what the owners were responsible for, how effective the regulatory groups were, and the conditions that let a dangerous situation just keep going. The lives of these 7 babies literally depend on us getting to the bottom of this. All right, let's inject some life into this. You know, make it sound like a human's actually talking, not some robot reading a script. Here we go. So this fire, the one that tragically took innocent lives, yeah, it wasn't some freak accident. Nope. It was a direct result, a gut-wrenching consequence of sheer neglect and a shocking, blatant disregard for human life by the hospital's owners. We dug into it, and what we found is seriously chilling. Turns out there were internal factory documents they deliberately ignored that screamed about major maintenance failures. And reports flagging inspections that were way overdue, screaming for urgent attention. They just got buried, tossed aside like they were nothing. This wasn't just a mistake, folks. This was a conscious choice. They chose profits over the safety of brand new babies. And these owners, this shadowy group running a bunch of different businesses, their track record, it's pretty disturbing, honestly. We're still digging into the specifics of any past screw-ups, but whispers from reliable sources suggest a pattern. Always cutting corners, always dodging responsibility across all their ventures. This wasn't a one-off slip-up. It was their go-to move. So who's really on the hook for all this? The way this place was set up, the chain of command, it was practically designed to fall apart. There was supposed to be someone in charge, someone responsible for keeping the critical air conditioning system humming along safely. And they dropped the ball, big time. Why? Were they told to look the other way? Were those warnings just too much of a pain to deal with? It all points to a massive failure in supervision, all the way from the guys on the ground to the folks in the fancy offices. To really get a handle on what happens legally, we chatted with a lawyer who's seen this kind of thing before. They laid out the whole complicated mess of who's liable, the careless owners, sure, but also the bodies supposed to be watching over things. The law says people need to be held accountable, but man, when stuff like this happens, justice can move slower than molasses. It leaves families totally broken while the people responsible just keep on going. This fire, it wasn't just some random act of fate. It was a disaster that should not have happened. All the signs point straight to the owners of this place. Their alleged carelessness, their alleged greed, it cost 7 little lives. We're gonna keep digging, keep exposing exactly how bad this really was and what systemic failures let this nightmare unfold. Because the fight for justice for those 7 innocent souls. Yeah, that's just getting started. 7 innocent lives just gone. This horrific fire at a children's hospital in Vivek Vihar. Yeah, it wasn't some random accident. It was a gut-wrenching result of the owner totally dropping the ball on safety, plus a whole lot of regulatory screw-ups too. Source: NDTV, the Indian Express, Hindustan Times, Times of India, the Hindu. Seriously, when you put making money way ahead of keeping people safe, you end up with this kind of irreplaceable loss, especially when it's tiny newborns we're talking about. This whole mess just screams that we gotta seriously rethink industrial safety rules, especially smack dab in the middle of our cities. How many more of these totally avoidable tragedies do we need to see before proper oversight isn't just a maybe, but a definite every single time? The grief those families are going through, losing their little ones, that's a scar that's never gonna fade, a constant, painful reminder of the justice they're desperate for and the massive hole left in their lives. So let's be real with ourselves. How many more precious lives have to be snuffed out before safety is actually the top priority? This is our cue to demand real, sweeping change. We need way tougher enforcement of the rules we already have, and a fundamental flip in how we see human life when businesses are just trying to make a buck. Moving forward, we absolutely need some serious, solid reforms. This means making sure every single place, especially those looking after our most fragile folks, is sticking to the absolute highest safety standards. It's high time for some serious accountability and a real promise to make sure nightmares like this can never happen again.